So I've been really looking forward to this one because, well, realizing that a spreadsheet cannot save you from your own ego is just, it's a deeply humbling concept.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. It really is.
because usually when we talk about diagnosing a problem, like whether it's structural or biological or whatever, there's this underlying expectation of precision.
It's
It's almost like engineering.
right.
Like if you break your arm, you go to the hospital, the doctor puts you in an x-ray machine, the film prints out, and there's a jagged white line across your radius. The doctor just points at it and says, there it is. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's entirely binary. Like the bone is broken or the bone is
Yeah,
intact.
exactly.
The data is visible. It can be categorized. And most importantly, it dictates a single, undeniable course of action. And we find just an immense amount of psychological comfort in that kind of visible certainty.
We crave it,
Hmm.
totally crave it. But then, you step into the world of human behavior, and suddenly that x-ray machine is completely useless.
Yeah.
We're looking at a landscape that is murky, it's unpredictable, and highly, highly emotional. And I think nowhere is that disconnect between what we think should be a perfectly rational science and what actually happens in reality more obvious than with our money.
That is so true.
So welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are unpacking something that affects literally every single one of you listening right now. We are exploring the hidden psychological levers that dictate financial success and, conversely, financial ruin.
It's a massive topic.
It really is. And we're basing this massive exploration on excerpts and research from Morgan Housel's brilliant book, The Psychology of Money. And the core premise we are looking at today is pretty simple, but I promise you, it is completely paradigm shifting. Basically, doing well with money has very little to do with how smart you are and almost everything to do with how you behave.
Yeah, and let's just contextualize why that premise feels so jarring to us at first glance.
Please do.
Because society overwhelmingly teaches finance like it's physics.
Like physics, yeah.
Right. We treat it like it's a hard science governed by these strict, immutable mathematical laws. We're taught that if we just, memorize the formulas.
Just plug in the numbers.
Exactly. If we just plug the right income and expense data into a spreadsheet, the spreadsheet will spit out this optimal path to wealth. And we, like perfectly rational little robots, will just seamlessly execute that path.
Which we never do.
We never do, because finance shouldn't be taught like physics. It should be taught like psychology.
Right.
In the real world, financial decisions are almost never made in a vacuum by these dispassionate actors. They are made at the dinner table. They're made in the middle of a sleepless night.
Yeah, stressed out at 3 a.m.
Exactly. They are driven by our personal histories, our pride, our deep-seated insecurities, and fundamentally, by the twin emotional engines of fear and greed.
So if you are listening to this right now, I want you to pay really close attention. Because by the end of this deep dive, you are going to walk away with a completely new toolkit.
A totally new framework, yeah.
Not just for understanding your own financial anxieties and decisions, but for understanding the genuinely crazy things that other people do with their cash. We're going to, pull back the curtain on the mechanics of why we act the way we do.
It's fascinating.
But to truly understand why behavioral control absolutely trumps raw intelligence in this arena, we have to look at the ultimate proof. Like, we have to look at the only industry on planet Earth where a janitor can entirely outsmart a Harvard-educated executive.
Yeah, that brings us to the fascinating, just almost unbelievable story of Ronald Read.
I'll love this story.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
If you were to look up his life story, it reads like the ultimate blue-collar American archetype. He was born in rural Vermont. He was the first person in his entire family to graduate high school.
Wow.
And he managed to do that by hitchhiking to campus every single day because he didn't have any other way to get there.
Just a completely humble, unassuming origin story. Like, no trust funds, no elite prep schools.
None whatsoever. And his adult life followed that exact same trajectory. He basically fixed cars at a local gas station for 25 years.
Yeah.
After that, he swept floors at a JCPenney for another 17 years. And when he was 38 years old, he bought this modest 2-bedroom house for $12,000, and he lived in that exact same house for the rest of his life.
$12,000. That's wild.
Yeah. His main hobby, according to the people who knew him, was just chopping firewood. He was widowed at 50, never remarried. He was actually known to wear a coat held together by safety pins.
Really? Safety pins?
Yeah, just a quiet, incredibly low-key existence. But when Ronald Reed died in 2014 at the age of 92, he made international headlines.
Which is the last thing you'd expect for a guy sweeping floors at JCPenney.
Exactly. Because out of the nearly 3 million Americans who died that year, fewer than 4,000 of them had a net worth of over $8 million.
Wow.
And Ronald Reed, the rural janitor who chopped his own firewood, was one of them.
$8 million.
$8 million.
From sweeping floors and fixing carburetors.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the best part is what he actually did with the money.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
He left $2 million to his stepkids and more than $6 million to his local hospital and library. And naturally, everyone who knew him was absolutely baffled. Like, they were tearing up the floorboards looking for the secret.
Right. They thought, was there a hidden lottery ticket?
Or like an unknown rich uncle who left him an inheritance that he just kept secret.
But they looked, and there was no secret. The mechanism of his wealth was startlingly boring.
Boring is a good word for it.
He simply saved whatever tiny fraction he could from his modest paychecks, and he invested it in standard blue-chip stocks.
Just the basics.
Companies that pay dividends, companies that make everyday products. And then, crucially, he just waited.
For decades.
For decades. He let those tiny, consistent savings compound until they snowballed into an $8 million fortune. It was pure, unadulterated endurance. Now, to really understand why this is a psychological phenomenon and not merely like a lucky financial anomaly, we have to contrast Ronald Reed with another man who was in the news just a few months before Reed died.
Okay, let's get into it.
His name was Richard Fuscone.
Right, and Richard Fuscone is essentially the exact polar opposite of Ronald Reed on paper. He's the guy who did everything, quote-unquote, right, according to the traditional physics of finance model.
Precisely. Fuscone was a Harvard-educated executive at Merrill Lynch. He had an MBA from a top-tier institution.
Very fancy.
He was so extraordinarily successful in the high-stakes, hyper-competitive world of global finance that he actually retired in his 40s to become a full-time philanthropist.
Wow. So he basically beat the game.
He did. The former CEO of Merrill Lynch publicly praised his business savvy and his sound judgment. He was featured on Crane's prestigious 40 Under 40 list of successful business people. He had every conceivable advantage.
Elite financial education.
Yeah, insider industry knowledge and a Rolodex of the most powerful economic connections on Earth.
The ultimate insider. I mean, he is playing the game on easy mode. So how did he deploy all that immense pedigree and capital?
Well, he deployed it by borrowing heavily to maximize his lifestyle.
Ah, here we go.
In the mid-2000s, Fuscone took on massive debt to expand an 18,000-square-foot mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut.
18,000 square feet.
To give you a sense of scale, this house had 11 bathrooms, 2 elevators, 2 pools, 7 garages, and it cost more than $90,000 a month just to maintain the property.
Okay, wait. Let me just pause there so you listening can absorb that number. $90,000 a month. That is over $1 million a year, post-tax, purely on maintenance.
Just to keep the lights on and the grass cut.
That isn't even the mortgage. That is just staggering to comprehend.
It's the definition of living highly leveraged. He was using debt to amplify his purchasing power, just assuming the good times would roll indefinitely.
Right.
And then the 2008 financial crisis hit. Now, that crisis hurt almost everyone globally, but it turned Fuscone's highly leveraged empire into absolute dust.
Because of the debt.
Exactly. The combination of massive, unyielding debt obligations and totally illiquid assets left him entirely bankrupt. He actually stood before a bankruptcy judge and stated he had zero income.
Man.
First, his secondary estate in Palm Beach was foreclosed on. Then, just 5 months before Ronald Reed left his hidden billions to charity, Fuscone's sprawling Greenwich mansion was sold at a foreclosure auction for 75% less than what an insurance company had previously appraised it for.
Just a total wipeout. Let's actually break down the underlying mechanism here because I feel like this is the core of our entire deep dive today. Let's explain what leverage actually means and why it's so toxic when the weather changes.
Yeah, that's a crucial distinction to make.
Like if you buy a $10 million house in cash and the real estate market drops 30%, you lose $3 million on paper. It hurts, obviously.
Very much so.
But you still have a house. You still have a place to sleep. But if you use leverage, say, you put $1 million down and borrow $9 million from the bank and the market drops 30%. Well, your equity isn't just dented, it's wiped out entirely.
Completely gone.
And you now owe the bank $2 million that you do not have. You are completely trapped. Ronald Reed was patient. And he lived so far below his means that he never interrupted the math of compounding.
Right.
Richard Fuscone was greedy. He utilized massive leverage, pushed his risk to the absolute limit, and left himself zero room for error.
And what's vital to recognize is that Ronald Read didn't just happen to exist as a statistical glitch, you know?
Yeah.
His story is the ultimate irrefutable proof that financial success is a soft skill, not a hard science.
Mhm.
Fuscone had the hard science mastered. I mean, he could calculate derivative yields in his sleep.
Right.
But Read had the soft skill of behavioral control mastered.
I have to throw an analogy at you because this concept just bends my brain every time I think about it.
Go for it.
It is entirely impossible for me to imagine a story where a janitor casually walks into a surgical theater, picks up a scalpel, and performs a better open-heart transplant than a Harvard-trained cardiovascular surgeon.
Right, that would be absurd.
Or like a gas station attendant sitting down at a drafting table and designing a structurally superior skyscraper than a formally trained, licensed architect.
Yeah, and never happens.
We literally never see amateurs outperforming the world's top nuclear engineers. So why is finance literally the only field on the planet where an amateur with zero formal training can not just compete with, but completely crush a seasoned, highly educated professional?
That is the perfect question to frame this whole discussion. The answer is that a surgeon relies on the immutable laws of human biology, which are exactly the same for every single patient.
Right.
An architect relies on the immutable laws of physics, tension, gravity, but an investor relies on predicting and managing human behavior.
Which is messy.
Very messy, starting entirely with their own behavior. Financial decisions aren't made on those pristine spreadsheets. They are based on our personal worldviews, our ego, our need for status, and our unique individual histories.
Yeah.
A Harvard degree in finance teaches you how to read a balance sheet. It absolutely does not guarantee that you have mastered your own greed or that you have the emotional fortitude to endure a market crash without panicking.
So it's not about the data you possess. It's about how you behave with the data you possess under pressure.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the next logical question. If our financial decisions are dictated by our personal worldviews, how do we form those worldviews in the first place? Like, why does someone like Fuscone think taking on that much debt is a brilliant strategy, while Reed is perfectly content chopping firewood?
Well, exploring that takes us to this really profound idea of the empathy of finance. It's the realization that no one is crazy.
That's a strong statement. No one.
No one. Every single person on this planet goes through life anchored to a set of views about money that are based on their highly specific generation, their geography, and their family background.
I really want to emphasize that for you listening. Nobody is crazy. We all think we are the objective observers of the economy, but we are actually just projecting our own highly limited autobiographies onto the rest of the world.
Yeah, the author puts it in a way that is mathematically striking. Your personal experiences with money make up perhaps 0.0000001% of what has actually happened in the world.
Tiny, just a speck.
Exactly. But those same incredibly narrow experiences dictate 80% of how you think the world works.
Oh, wow.
We are all essentially prisoners to the tiny sliver of reality we've personally observed.
Let's test that theory. Can you give me a concrete example of how two rational people could look at the exact same economic data and come to totally opposite conclusions simply because of when they were born?
Sure, let's look at the stock market through the lens of generational neuroplasticity. Imagine two groups of people. One group is born in 1950, the other is born in 1970.
Got it.
The people born in 1950, during their late teens and 20s, which are their highly formative years when their brains are wiring their baseline understanding of risk and reward, they experienced a stock market that went literally nowhere.
It was just completely flat.
It was a stagnant, lost decade. Adjusted for inflation, it was essentially a flat line.
Right.
Now, take the people born in 1970. During their formative teens and 20s, the S&P 500 went up almost tenfold. It was an unprecedented boom.
A tenfold increase versus a flat line. I mean, those aren't just different charts. Those are two entirely different realities.
Exactly. So you have these two groups of equally smart, equally educated people, but separated by just the dumb luck of their birth year, going through life with a fundamentally different biological wiring regarding the stock market.
Yeah.
The 1970s group views the market as a reliable, wealth-generating machine. Taking risks feels natural to them. The 1950s group views the market as a stagnant, dangerous casino. Avoiding risk feels like survival to them.
That makes total sense.
You see the exact same thing with inflation. If you were born in 1960s America, inflation during your impressionable 20s sent prices up threefold.
Oh, yeah, the gas lines.
You remember the gas lines. You viscerally remember your paycheck buying less milk every single week. But if you were born in 1990, inflation was so historically low for most of your life that you probably never even thought about it until the post-pandemic era.
Right, it just wasn't a factor. And you can't just read about this stuff in a textbook and truly understand it.
No, you really can.
Like, you can't read a Wikipedia article about a 1970s gas line and feel the actual visceral panic of not being able to get to work to feed your family.
Exactly.
That actually brings to mind the John F. Kennedy anecdote from the sources, which I found just fascinating.
It's a great story.
So JFK was running for president in the 1960 election, and a reporter asked him what he remembered from the Great Depression. Now, the Depression was the defining economic trauma for millions of Americans, right?
Oh, absolutely. It shaped an entire generation's relationship with hoarding food and hiding cash under the mattress.
Yes. And JFK honestly admitted that he had no firsthand knowledge of it.
None at all. His family possessed one of the great fortunes of the world, and their wealth actually grew exponentially during the Depression.
Right. They had bigger houses, more servants.
JFK said the only thing he saw directly was his father hiring extra gardeners just to give local men a job so their families could eat.
Wow.
He freely admitted he didn't really learn about the true devastation of the Depression until he read about it as a student at Harvard.
Which became a massive political liability for him.
Oh, massive.
Voters were outraged. They were wondering how someone who didn't understand the biggest economic story of their lives could possibly be trusted to run the economy.
Sure.
But the takeaway here is that JFK wasn't crazy for not inherently fearing economic ruin. He had literally never seen it.
Right.
And the voters weren't crazy for being terrified of it. They had lived it. They just occupied different realities.
And this concept of differing realities is absolutely crucial when we look at financial behaviors. We tend to judge harshly from the outside.
Yeah.
Let's unpack a highly controversial example from the text.
Yeah.
In the United States, the lowest income households spend over $400 a year, on average, on lottery tickets.
Okay, $400.
Now, what makes that statistic striking is that roughly 40% of Americans also say they could not come up with $400 in an emergency,
Oof.
which means that the demographic buying $400 in lottery tickets is, by and large, the exact same demographic that says they couldn't cover a minor medical bill or a blown tire.
Okay, here is where I have to push back hard on behalf of the listener, because my brain is screaming right now.
I get it.
I completely understand the generational differences. I understand the 1950 versus 1970 stock market experience. But blowing your only emergency safety net on a piece of cardboard with a 1 in a million chance of paying off, I'm sorry, but that just feels purely irrational.
It doesn't.
Isn't that just a rationalization for bad habits? How is that not objectively crazy?
It is a totally valid reaction. To you and to me, looking through the lens of our own financial stability, it seems crazy. It seems like a mathematical failure.
Totally.
But we have to stretch our empathy to understand the underlying sociological and psychological logic of the person standing at the convenience store counter buying that ticket.
Okay, explain the logic.
Consider someone living on the very edge of poverty, without access to upward mobility, to someone living paycheck to paycheck where saving even $10 feels impossible, where the idea of sending their kids to college without crippling generational debt feels entirely out of reach. They aren't looking at the lottery ticket as a statistical financial asset.
Right.
They aren't running an expected value calculation in their head.
Then what are they doing?
They are buying the only tangible dream available to them. For $2, they are purchasing a temporary psychological reprieve. They get a few hours of hope that they can eventually get the stuff that wealthy people take for granted. Security, vacations, a paid-off house.
Just a moment to imagine a different life.
Exactly. As the author pointedly observes, you and I are already living their dream.
Yeah.
We have the safety net. So we don't understand why they would pay money for the mere illusion of it.
Right, because we already have the reality of it.
Exactly. You do not have to agree with the behavior. It remains a mathematically disastrous idea, but you must understand the logic driving it.
Yeah.
Every financial decision a person makes complete sense to them in that specific moment, checking the psychological boxes they desperately need to check.
That is heavy. We are paying for a dream. And you may not understand that because you are already living a dream.
Yeah.
That completely reframes the judgment. It really reinforces that we are all walking around wearing completely different pairs of glasses, looking at the exact same money and assuming everyone else's prescription is broken.
That's a great way to put it. And if our worldviews, our neuroplasticity, our risk tolerances are shaped so heavily by the completely random luck of when we were born, where we were born, and to whom we were born,
Yeah.
it forces us to confront a very uncomfortable truth. We have to examine the profound roles of those twin invisible forces that dictate so much of our financial lives, luck and risk.
So if so much of this is out of our control, what does this actually mean for how we evaluate success?
Well,
Because the sources refer to luck and risk as siblings.
right. They represent the reality that every outcome in life is guided by forces entirely outside of our individual effort.
Which is hard for us to accept.
Extremely hard. Human beings love a neat narrative. We love to tell stories of individual triumph, of self-made billionaires who supposedly willed their way at the top through pure grit, unyielding intelligence, and early mornings.
A hustle culture.
Exactly. But we consistently and dramatically underestimate how much luck plays a role. Let's look at Bill Gates. An undeniable genius, incredibly hardworking, fiercely competitive. But the book provides vital context that ruins the self-made myth. For every Bill Gates, there is a Kent Evans.
Kent Evans, that's a name that history completely forgot. I mean, I had never heard of him before reading this material.
Almost no one has. Kent Evans was a brilliant peer of Bill Gates in high school. He was just as mathematically skilled, just as driven, and just as deeply obsessed with computers at a time in the 1960s when almost no one on the planet had access to them.
Wow.
He shared the exact same incredibly rare early advantages that Gates did attending Lakeside School, one of the only high schools in the world with a terminal connected to a mainframe computer. They were partners.
So what happened to him?
Well, Kent Evans died young in a tragic mountaineering accident before he even graduated high school.
Oh my God.
Yeah. He ended up on the wrong side of what we can call life roulette. Gates experienced a 1 in a million stroke of luck by being at that specific school at that specific time. Evans experienced a 1 in a million stroke of devastating bad luck. He encountered the ultimate bad risk.
It's just sobering. It forces you to realize that success is never a direct one-to-one ratio of hard work.
Never.
And this concept isn't just about extreme outliers like tech billionaires. It applies to everyday risk management too.
Yeah.
Like the text brings up this fascinating example of the MIT blackjack card counters.
Oh, the famous team led by guys like Kevin Lewis.
Yeah. They know they have a mathematical edge over the casino. Like, they've done the complex calculations, but they never bet all their chips at once.
Never. Because they deeply understand the mechanism of variance.
Right.
They understand the difference between an edge and a certainty.
Can you explain that difference?
Sure. Let's say they have counted the cards perfectly, and they know they have a 52% chance of winning the next hand.
Okay.
That is a massive edge in a casino.
Huge.
But it also means there is a 48% chance they will lose the hand. And you can easily lose 5, 6, or 10 hands in a row with a 48% chance of failure.
Just a bad run of luck.
Exactly. If they get cocky and bet every chip they possess on that one hand, and the dealer happens to get lucky, they are wiped out. They are mathematically correct, but practically dead. They understand that you have to survive the short-term variance in order for your long-term mathematical edge to eventually pay off.
But society struggles so much to measure or acknowledge this variance. It's like we have a collective cultural blind spot when it comes to luck.
We absolutely do, and the reason is tied to our egos. Acknowledging luck is emotionally difficult.
Yeah, I guess it is.
If you acknowledge luck in someone else's success, you look jealous, bitter, and petty.
Yeah.
If you acknowledge luck in your own success, it feels demoralizing, like it diminishes your late nights and your hard work.
That's a really good point.
So society defaults to entirely ignoring it. Just think about the cover of Forbes magazine. What do we actually see celebrated?
Usually some young prodigy who made $1 billion.
Right. Forbes never puts poor investors who made mathematically sound, brilliant, low-risk decisions, but got hit by a 5% chance of bad variance on its cover.
No one wants to read that story.
Instead, it puts rich investors who made wild, reckless, highly leveraged decisions, but happened to get lucky and land on the right side of the roulette wheel on its cover. We worship the outcome, and we completely ignore the process.
Which creates terrifying feedback loops for the rest of us.
Absolutely.
Like, if we are trying to learn how to be wealthy, and Forbes is celebrating the guy who get it all on black and won, we might internalize the false lesson that betting it all on black is a valid, replicable financial strategy.
And that leads directly to destruction.
And that leads directly to the concept of room for error, or what value investors call a margin of safety.
This is perhaps the single most critical concept in personal finance. You have to plan on your plan not going according to plan.
Say that again?
Plan on your plan not going according to plan.
I love that.
That is what true room for error means. It's acknowledging the inevitability of bad luck. It's accepting that markets will crash, pipes will burst, unexpected medical expenses will arise. This is precisely why leverage taking on debt to amplify your returns, like Richard Fuscone did, is described as the devil. Leverage aggressively eliminates your room for error. It requires the world to be perfect for you to survive.
Let's trace that logic out. If luck and risk are so powerful, and the Forbes covers are actively misleading us, and we cannot control the macroeconomic era we were born into, how on earth are you supposed to learn from successful people?
That's the million-dollar question.
Like, if I am listening to this right now, I might be thinking, should I just throw my hands up, admit the stock market is just a giant casino and guess?
Not at all. You don't abandon the game, you change how you filter the lessons.
Okay.
The advice is to stop obsessing over extreme outliers and start looking for broad patterns.
Yeah.
You cannot emulate Warren Buffett's specific path.
Right.
His results are so staggeringly extreme that the role of luck in his specific lifetime performance is undeniably high. You can't replicate the era he invested in, but you can emulate the broad foundational behavioral traits of successful people.
Okay, let's nail that down. What is a broad, replicable pattern we can actually copy?
The most prominent pattern among the wealthy who stay wealthy is an intense focus on survival. Surviving long enough for the math of compounding to work its magic. They often utilize what is known as a barbell strategy.
The barbell. I love this visual. Let's break down how that actually functions in a portfolio.
Imagine a physical barbell. You have heavy weights clustered on the extreme opposite ends and absolutely nothing in the middle.
Right.
Financially, on one end of the barbell, you take calculated aggressive risks to grow your wealth. You invest in equities, you start a company, you try to innovate.
Okay.
But on the other end of the barbell, you are utterly terrified. You are deeply, almost irrationally conservative.
Terrified.
Yes, you hold large amounts of cash, you aggressively avoid consumer debt, you live well below your means. The logic is that the conservative side guarantees your physical and financial survival, no matter what goes wrong with your risky investments. You never, ever put yourself in a position where one bad break, one market crash knocks you completely off the board.
That is brilliant. You're completely separating the growth engine from the survival engine. You don't let them mix.
Exactly.
And if so much of this is out of our control and survival requires this massive margin of safety, how do we actually know when we've secured that safety? Because it seems like the finish line keeps moving.
It does.
So the ultimate way to ensure survival, to give yourself that massive room for error, is simply not needing too much in the first place. Which brings us perfectly to the psychology of enough and the illusions of wealth.
This is the pivot. This is where we transition from the mechanics of how we get money to the psychology of how we view what we have.
Yeah.
There is a legendary story in the text involving the authors Kurt Vonnegut and Joseph Heller.
Oh, I know this one.
They are attending a lavish party hosted by a billionaire on Shelter Island. Vonnegut turns to Heller and casually informs him that their host, a hedge fund manager, had made more money in a single day than Heller had earned from his wildly successful, generation-defining novel Catch-22 over its entire history.
That is a staggering comparison.
Hmm.
I mean, a lifetime of royalties from an undisputed literary masterpiece completely eclipsed by one random Tuesday of hedge fund trading.
Yes, most people would feel deeply bitter or inadequate in that moment, but Heller's response is profound. He looks at Vonnegut and says, "Yes, but I have something he will never have. Enough."
Enough. It's such a tiny word, but it acts as a superpower in a capitalist society.
It's the hardest financial skill to master,
Yeah.
getting the goalpost to stop moving.
Right.
Modern capitalism is incredibly efficient at two things: generating wealth and generating envy.
Envy is a big one.
Huge. If your expectations rise equally with your financial results, there is absolutely no logical reason to strive for more because you will just feel the exact same level of dissatisfaction at a higher tax bracket.
It's like walking on a treadmill. You keep increasing the speed, making more money, buying nicer things, thinking you're going to eventually reach a destination of happiness. But the treadmill just speeds up to match you.
Exactly.
You're exhausted, you're sweating, but you are in the exact same spot emotionally. It's the ceiling of social comparison. And the text outlines this incredible ladder of comparison that proves the ceiling is practically infinite.
Let's hear it.
Imagine a rookie professional baseball player making $500,000 a year. By any normal statistical standard of human history, he is incredibly rich.
Very wealthy, yeah.
But he goes to work and plays on the same team as Mike Trout, who has a $430 million contract. Next to Trout, the rookie feels broke. He feels inadequate.
And the ladder doesn't stop there. Mike Trout makes $36 million a year, but a top 10 hedge fund manager makes $340 million in a single year. Next to the hedge fund manager, Mike Trout feels poor. And the hedge fund manager looks at Warren Buffett, whose wealth grew by $3.5 billion in a single year.
Just unfathomable numbers.
And Buffett can look at someone like Jeff Bezos, who at times has made more per hour than the rookie baseball player made all year. It is a game that cannot be won mathematically. The only way to win is to simply refuse to play.
To step off the treadmill and realize you have enough.
Exactly.
Because it's the inability to deny a potential dollar that eventually catches up to you. Think of guys like Rajat Gupta or Bernie Madoff.
Great examples.
These were men who were already incredibly rich, possessing hundreds of millions of dollars. They had won capitalism.
They won the game.
But they risked invaluable, irreplaceable things, their freedom, their families, their reputations, their legacies, to illegally acquire more money that they didn't even need. They destroy their lives because they lacked a sense of enough.
That is the ultimate tragedy of greed. But part of the reason everyday people struggle with enough is because we fundamentally misunderstand what wealth actually is and what purpose it serves.
How so?
We are burdened by this deep-seated evolutionary desire to signal our success to others.
Right. Let's dig into that, because the man in the car paradox is one of my favorite concepts here.
That's so good.
The author talks about his time working as a valet in Los Angeles, constantly parking Ferraris and Lamborghinis. And he realized something profound about human nature.
What was it?
When you see someone driving a Ferrari down the street, you don't look at the driver and think, wow, the guy driving that car is so cool, I really respect him. You look at the car and think, wow, if I had that car, people would think I am cool.
It's completely ironic, and it exposes the flaw in status signaling. People spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a car specifically to get respect and admiration from others.
Yeah.
But the people looking at the car aren't admiring the driver. They are ignoring the driver and just projecting themselves into the driver's seat. Why do we do this? Because 10,000 years ago, displaying excess resources like extra food or an elaborate shelter signaled that you were a capable survivor and a good mate. It was an evolutionary advantage.
Right.
But today, buying a depreciating luxury asset doesn't increase your survivability. It actually depletes your resources. We are trying to satisfy a primitive urge using a system that actively makes us poorer. No one is as impressed with your possessions as you are.
Which leads to people spending all their money to buy things to impress people who aren't even paying attention to them.
Bingo.
There's that incredible, almost comedic quote from Rihanna's accountant.
Oh, I love this quote.
She was nearing bankruptcy after massive, unchecked overspending, and she sued him for mismanagement. And his defense in court was brilliantly simple. He said, was it really necessary to tell her that if you spend money on things, you will end up with the things and not the money?
It sounds like a punchline, but it's the core truth of personal finance that most people ignore. We have to clearly, forcefully delineate between the concepts of being rich and being wealthy. They are not synonyms.
Let's bring that down.
Being rich means you have current high income. You drive a $100,000 car. You wear designer clothes. It is visible, loud spending.
Okay.
Being wealthy is the exact opposite. Wealth is the income not spent. It's the hidden assets. Wealth is the first-class upgrade you declined. It's the expensive watch you didn't buy. It's the money sitting quietly in an index fund, invisible to the world, slowly compounding.
So spending money to show people how much money you have is literally the fastest, most efficient way to have less money.
Exactly.
It's so deeply counterintuitive. We are socially conditioned by Instagram, by television, by our neighbors to think that wealth is what we see. But wealth is actually what you don't see.
Yeah.
If you walk through an upper middle class neighborhood, you see the massive mortgages, the leased luxury SUVs in the driveway, you see rich. But the guy in the 15-year-old Honda Civic 2 streets over who has $3 million sitting in an index fund, he is wealthy, but he is invisible.
And because true wealth is invisible, it is very hard to find wealthy role models.
That's a huge problem.
You can easily find rich role models. They're all over social media. But wealthy role models are hidden. Ronald Read was deeply wealthy, but nobody knew it until he died, precisely because he never spent it to signal his status.
So buying a Ferrari actually depletes your wealth, and true wealth is the money you don't spend. What is that unspent money actually doing? Because cash just stuffed in a mattress loses value to inflation. How does invisible money become powerful?
Well, the answer to that relies on a mathematical concept that our human brains are literally biologically not wired to understand. Let's talk about confounding compounding and the long tail.
Let's do it.
To truly grasp the absurd power of compounding, the author takes us completely out of the realm of finance and asks us to look at the billion-year history of Earth's ice ages.
Ice ages. Okay, I'm with you.
For a long time, scientists assumed that ice ages were caused by extremely brutal, severe winters that froze the globe. But the reality of the mechanism is much more subtle and much more powerful. It wasn't extreme winters that caused the ice age. It was moderately cool summers.
Oh, wait, I want to make sure I understand the mechanism here. Summers caused the planet to freeze.
Yes. A moderately cool summer meant that not all the snow from the previous winter melted.
Oh, I see.
It left a thin, almost unnoticeable layer of white snow on the ground. When the next winter arrived, new snow fell on top of that existing layer. Because there was now a permanent layer of white snow, it altered the Earth's albedo effect.
The reflection.
Exactly. It reflected more of the sun's warm rays away from the Earth and back into space. This caused the planet to cool just a tiny bit more.
Which meant the next summer was even cooler.
Yes, leaving even more snow, reflecting even more sunlight. That microscopic change in conditions, just a slightly cooler summer, leaving an inch of snow compounds upon itself until thousands of years later, you have continental ice sheets miles thick covering the northern hemisphere.
That is wild. Small, seemingly insignificant changes in assumptions lead to absolutely absurd, impractical numbers over time.
And that is exactly how it works with money.
Right.
We are culturally obsessed with finding the highest returns, the secret crypto coin, the perfect stock pick. We want the severe winter.
Yeah, the big splash.
But the key to Warren Buffett's success isn't just that he's a remarkably good investor. It's that he has been a remarkably good investor for 3/4 of a century. Look at the raw numbers. Of Warren Buffett's roughly $84.5 billion net worth cited in the book, $81.5 billion of it came after his 65th birthday.
Yeah. I want you listening to just pause and absorb the weight of that statistic. $81.5 billion came after traditional retirement age.
His secret isn't just a high annual rate of return. His secret is longevity. He never interrupted the compounding process. He survived long enough for the snow to turn into an ice sheet.
But our brains just reject this kind of math. We can't visualize it. Let's do the mental exercise from the text because it really proves why we struggle with this.
Do it.
If I ask you what 8 plus 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 8 is, you could guess it's somewhere around 70 in a split second. The actual answer is 72. Your brain handles linear addition easily.
Right.
But if I change the plus sign to a multiplication sign, what is 8 times 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 8?
Yeah.
Your brain just breaks.
Yeah.
You have no intuitive feel for the scale of the answer.
None at all. The answer is over 134 million.
From 72 to 134 million, simply by changing linear addition to exponential compounding.
It's massive.
And why do we fail at this? Because evolutionary biology didn't require us to understand exponential growth.
No, not at all.
Early humans needed to track the linear trajectory of a thrown spear to hunt, or calculate the linear distance of an approaching predator. Evolution didn't require us to calculate the exponential growth of a bacteria colony or a mutual fund. We literally lack the neurological hardware to intuitively grasp compounding finance.
We are linear thinkers trying to navigate an exponential financial world.
Exactly.
And because compounding takes decades to reach those absurd, brain-breaking numbers, the single most important metric for financial success isn't your annual return. It's simply staying in the game.
To survive.
You have to avoid ruin. And to endure for 50 years, you have to appreciate another related concept, the long tail.
The long tail, meaning a tiny minority of events account for the vast majority of outcomes.
Precisely. The fact that human beings even exist on Earth is a massive long-tail event. We live on one habitable rock out of hundreds of billions of dead planets. In business and investing, the mechanics are the same. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. George Soros, the famous investor, has a great quote about this reality.
What did he say?
He said, "It's not whether you're right or wrong that's important, but how much money you make when you're right and how much you lose when you're wrong."
So you don't need a perfect batting average. You don't need to pick the winning stock every time. You just need a few massive hits to pay for all the inevitable strikeouts, as long as the strikeouts don't take you out of the game entirely.
Exactly. Napoleon once defined a military genius as the man who can do the average thing when all those around him are going crazy.
That's good.
It applies perfectly to investing. You don't need to be a genius stock picker. You just need to do the boring, average, consistent thing during the 1% of the time when everyone else is panicking and selling their assets.
But doing the average thing when everyone else is panicking is incredibly difficult emotionally, which means we actually have to throw out the rigid financial textbooks.
Yeah.
Because to endure for 50 years without panicking, you actually have to stop trying to be perfectly rational.
Yeah.
Let's get into the psychology of strategy. Why being reasonable is vastly superior to being rational.
This represents a profound shift in how we approach planning. The author tells the deeply unsettling story of Julius Wagner Jarek.
Yeah, this is wild.
He was a 19th century psychiatrist who noticed an odd pattern. Patients suffering from severe syphilis who contracted unrelated high fevers sometimes recovered from their syphilis. The heat seemed to kill the bacteria.
Okay.
So he did something extreme. He began deliberately injecting his syphilis patients with strains of malaria.
He gave them malaria
I
on
see.
purpose as a medical treatment.
Yes, he used a lesser strain to induce a massive, dangerous fever, hoping the fever would burn out the fatal syphilis.
I mean, did it work?
It actually did. He won a Nobel Prize for it. But here is the critical takeaway. Technically, mathematically, injecting someone with a deadly disease to cure another deadly disease might have been a rational calculation of odds at the time, given the mortality rate of syphilis.
Right.
But it is absolutely not reasonable. It is terrifying.
Yeah, I'd say so.
And this applies to finance. We are not spreadsheets. We are highly emotional humans. And a plan that looks perfectly rational on a spreadsheet will often fail catastrophically in real life because it ignores human psychology.
That immediately makes me think of Harry Markowitz. This guy literally won the Nobel Prize in economics for creating modern portfolio theory, which is the mathematically optimal way to balance risk and return in a portfolio.
He literally wrote the book.
He's the guy who wrote the formulas that institutional algorithms use. But when he was asked how he invested his own personal retirement money, did he use his own perfect Nobel-winning mathematical models?
He did not. He split his money 50-50 between stocks and bonds.
Half and half. Why?
He explicitly stated his goal was to minimize future regret. He knew that if the stock market crashed, he would be sick with regret if he was all in stocks. If it boomed, he'd be sick if he was all in bonds. So he actively chose a suboptimal mathematical strategy because it was a highly reasonable psychological strategy. It allowed him to sleep soundly at night.
Let's take that a step further. A completely rational financial plan will fail because it assumes you are a static entity.
Right.
It assumes you won't panic when the market drops 30%. It assumes your career goals at 25 will be the exact same at 55.
Right.
But we change constantly.
That phenomenon is what psychologists call the end of history illusion. It was coined by the psychologist Daniel Gilbert.
Okay, what is it?
It describes this weird universal quirk of human nature where we are keenly aware of how much we've evolved and changed in our past, but we wildly underestimate how much we will change in the future. We delusionally think who we are right now is the finished, permanent product.
Which perfectly explains why teenagers pay good money to get ill-advised tattoos, and 30-somethings pay even more money to get those exact same tattoos painfully lasered off.
Exactly.
Or why young adults rush into marriage and middle-aged adults rush into divorce. We are terrible at predicting our future desires.
We underestimate our future evolution, which means we must be aware of sunk costs in our financial and professional lives. Do not let the decisions made by a younger, more naive version of yourself act as a prison for your current self.
Oh, that's powerful.
If you chose a career at 18, got a degree, and it makes you utterly miserable at 40, abandoning it isn't a failure. It's simply recognizing that you are a fundamentally different person now than you were at 18.
So we need a reasonable plan, a flexible plan, not a rigidly rational one if we want to endure. But enduring also means we have to pay the toll. And the price of investing is one of the most fundamentally misunderstood concepts out there. The book argues that you have to treat market volatility as a fee rather than a fine.
Let's look at how we purchase things in the physical world. If you want a car, you have three options. You can pay $30,000 for a new one, you can hunt for a cheaper used one, or you can steal one.
Steal one.
Now, 99% of people know that stealing the car is a terrible idea because the consequences prison vastly outweigh the upside of a free car. You accept that to get the asset, you must willingly pay the price.
That's just the basic social contract of commerce.
But in investing, people constantly try to steal the car. They want the 10% annual returns of the historical stock market, but they flat out refuse to pay the price.
Right.
And the price of investing isn't measured in dollars and cents handed to a cashier. It's measured in volatility, fear, doubt, and gut-wrenching uncertainty. When the market drops 20%, people naturally view that drop as a fine. A fine means you did something wrong, like getting a speeding ticket. You try to avoid fines. But if you shift your perspective and view that 20% drop as the fee for admission, the unavoidable emotional price you must pay to get those long-term compounding gains, your entire psychological relationship with the market changes.
It's the Disneyland ticket analogy. I love this framework.
It's perfect.
You pay $150 to get into Disneyland. You don't view that money leaving your wallet as a fine or a punishment for bad behavior. You view it as the required admission fee to enter the Magic Kingdom.
Right.
Sometimes it rains at Disneyland. Sometimes the lines for the rides are incredibly long and frustrating. But you pay the fee because the overall experience is worth the cost.
Precisely. If you view the market dropping as a fine, your instinct is to sell everything and run away to avoid further punishment. If you view it as a fee, you accept the rain, you stick around, and you eventually get to ride the rides.
But let me play devil's advocate here, because this is where everyone tries to outsmart the system. Isn't it just smarter to try to time the market? If I see the dark rain clouds coming over the Magic Kingdom, why not step out of line, avoid the drop, hold my money in cash, and jump back in when the sun comes out? Why willingly pay the painful fee if I can sneak in the back door?
Because sneaking in the back door is the exact equivalent of trying to steal the car.
Oh.
You might get away with it once or twice, you might dodge a downturn, but the money gods eventually catch you. The historical data on market timing is brutal and undeniable.
Really?
Attempting to time the market almost always results in missing the handful of days of massive, explosive gains that actually drive all the long-term returns. If you miss the top 10 trading days in a decade because you were sitting in cash waiting for the right time, your overall returns are completely destroyed.
Wow.
The price of success is uncertainty. You must be willing to feel the fear and pay the fee.
So if the ultimate goal of all of this discipline, the compounding, the margin of safety, the reasonable over-rational strategy, enduring the fee of volatility, if the goal is to minimize regret, survive, and sleep well at night, what is the actual point of building the wealth in the first place? What is the ultimate product that this invisible pile of money is supposed to buy?
That brings us to what I consider the most important philosophical section of the entire book.
Let's hear it.
The true purpose of money is freedom. The highest dividend that money pays is not a luxury good. It is the ability to control your own time.
Control your time, not buy a bigger house in Greenwich, Connecticut.
Right. There was a landmark study done in 1981 by a psychologist named Angus Campbell. He was deeply interested in evaluating well-being in America. He wanted to find the ultimate common denominator of happiness.
Okay, what did he find?
His findings were surprising. He found that you couldn't group happy people by their income level or their geography or their level of education. There were profoundly miserable rich people and profoundly miserable poor people. But the single most powerful common denominator he found was this. Having a strong sense of controlling one's life is a more dependable predictor of positive feelings of well-being than any other objective condition of life.
More than your salary bracket. More than the prestige of your job title or the size of your house.
Exactly. The ability to wake up every morning, look in the mirror, and say, I can do whatever I want today.
Yeah.
That is the highest, purest form of wealth.
There's this great story from Derek Sivers that illustrates this dynamic perfectly.
Yes.
He's a highly successful entrepreneur now, but he tells a story about his life when he was 22. He had a day job in Manhattan paying basically minimum wage, about $20,000 a year.
Right.
But he lived incredibly frugally. He never ate out, he never took a taxi, he shared a cheap apartment. His cost of living was restricted to only $1,000 a month, while he was earning $1,800. After 2 years of this intense discipline, he saved up $12,000.
And that $12,000 completely altered the trajectory of his life. It wasn't millions of dollars, but it was enough to allow him to quit his day job and become a full-time gigging musician. He essentially bought his total autonomy at age 22. That $12,000 gave him the freedom to direct his own life.
And this completely correlates with the end-of-life studies mentioned in the sources.
Whoa, the Carl Pillimer study?
Yeah. He interviewed thousands of elderly people, asking them what brought true happiness looking back over decades of life. Not a single person out of thousands of interviews said happiness comes from working harder to buy more expensive things.
Yeah.
Not a single person said it was important to be wealthier than the people living next door to them.
Right.
What they universally valued was quality friendships, being part of something bigger than themselves, and having unstructured, unhurried time with their children.
Which means we need to fundamentally rethink our definition of saving. Savings isn't just delayed consumption. Savings is just the gap between your ego and your income.
I want to repeat that so it sinks in for everyone listening. Savings is the gap between your ego and your income.
Most people operate under the assumption that you need a specific, tangible reason to save. You save for a down payment on a house or a new car or a European vacation or retirement.
Right. Earmarked money.
But you don't need a specific reason. In fact, you should save just to save. Because life is a continuous, unbroken chain of surprises. Unearmarked savings money, saved for no specific purpose, acts as a hedge against life's inevitable, unpredictable surprises.
The field mice.
Yes. What the author brilliantly calls the financial equivalent of field mice. The small, unexpected things that chew through your plans.
I love that framing. Think of every dollar you save not as a denial of a purchase today. Don't view it as a painful deprivation of a coffee or a pair of shoes. Think of it as buying a specific point of time in the future that would have otherwise belonged to a boss you despise, or an unexpected medical crisis, or a broken-down transmission.
Exactly.
You are quite literally taking that money and using it to buy back chunks of your own lifespan.
It is the unseen, uncalculated return on wealth. The return on cash sitting in the bank that gives you the option to confidently change careers or leave a toxic relationship or retire a few years early is literally incalculable on a spreadsheet, but it is the most valuable thing you own.
But if the formula to happiness and wealth is really this straightforward, save your money, control your time, ignore the Joneses, and just let exponential compounding do its thing, why do entire societies repeatedly fall into massive, destructive financial bubbles? Why do we see crippling debt cycles happen over and over again throughout history?
To understand the macro mechanics of bubbles, we have to look at the broader context of how we interact with society. The biggest, most systemic mistake we make is taking financial cues from people who are playing a fundamentally different game than we are.
Expand on that. What do you mean by playing different games?
Let's look at the dot-com bubble in the late 90s, or the 2008 housing crash. These bubbles inflate because a long-term investor, let's say a widow, saving conservatively for a retirement that is 20 years away, starts taking stock tips from a day trading hedge fund manager she sees on cable news.
Right.
The day trader is playing a short-term momentum game. He only cares what the stock price does by 3:00 p.m. today. He's going to sell it before the closing bell regardless.
Yeah.
The widow is playing a long-term survival game. But when she sees the day trader making massive immediate profits on TV, she feels like she's missing out. She gets sucked into his game. She abandons her conservative rules to play by his hyper-aggressive rules. And because she doesn't have his safety nets or his timeline, that's when she gets destroyed.
So basically, we are all wandering around playing a giant multiplayer game. But half of us think we're playing a slow game of Monopoly, half of us think we're playing a fast-paced game of Call of Duty, and we're all looking at each other getting mad for breaking the rules.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it, yes. We lump everyone together and call them investors as if we are all playing basketball on the exact same court with the exact same referee. We aren't.
That makes total sense.
You have to explicitly, perhaps even literally, write out what game you're playing financially. You need to define your timeline and your goals so you don't get swept up in the societal momentum of someone else's game. And part of resisting that societal momentum requires fighting the incredible intellectual seduction of pessimism.
Pessimism always sounds so smart, doesn't it? Like optimism sounds hopelessly naive, like you're wearing rose-colored glasses, but pessimism sounds like you've really done your homework and uncovered the hidden truth.
And there is a deeply rooted evolutionary reason for that bias. The Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman points out that organisms that treat threats as more urgent than opportunities have a significantly better chance to survive and pass on their genes. If you are an early human and you hear a rustle in the bushes, the optimist assumes it's a delicious berry bush. The pessimist assumes it's a hungry lion. The optimist goes to check and gets eaten. The pessimist runs away and lives.
So we're hardwired for it.
We are biologically wired to pay hyper attention to bad news. And financially, a recession threatens everyone's livelihood, so economic pessimism instantly captures our collective attention.
But the reality is that long-term optimism is the only stance that makes the math of compounding possible.
Exactly.
If you think the world is ending in 5 years, you won't invest for 20. Look at Stephen Hawking. The text uses him as an example. The man had an incurable, devastating motor neuron disease. He was paralyzed, unable to speak, trapped in his own body, yet he remained incredibly, genuinely optimistic about human progress, science, and discovery.
Yeah.
If he can maintain optimism about humanity's trajectory, surely we can be optimistic about the global economy over a 30-year horizon.
And that collective optimism or collective pessimism drives everything because ultimately stories run the economy.
Stories run the economy. I like that.
The author asks us to conduct a thought experiment. Imagine an alien observing Earth in 2007, right before the crash, and then returning in 2009, right at the bottom.
Okay.
From space, nothing physical changed. The factories were still standing, the technological knowledge was still there, the millions of workers still wanted to work.
Right, the buildings were still there.
The only thing that fundamentally changed was the narrative in our heads. In 2007, the story everyone believed was, housing prices will never fall, debt is good. In 2009, the story was, the financial system is collapsing, hoard your cash.
Wow.
The physical world didn't change, the story did. And the story dictates the reality of the economy.
And we are incredibly, dangerously susceptible to stories we desperately want to be true.
Exactly. The more you want something to be true, the more likely you are to believe a story that vastly overestimates the odds of it being true. That is the exact psychological mechanism that allowed Bernie Madoff to scam some of the smartest, most sophisticated, highly educated investors in the world.
He told them what they wanted to hear.
He told a story of consistent, never-wavering, positive returns. It was mathematically impossible. But the investors wanted the pain-free returns to be true so badly that they chose to believe the comforting story over the cold math.
Yeah.
It's the same reason people in the 14th century believed bizarre, useless plague cures. When the stakes are life and death or wealth and ruin, we cling to stories that offer salvation.
It all comes back to history and narrative, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The book has this fascinating postscript that traces the history of the U.S. consumer, and it really ties all these psychological threads, the envy, the leverage, the shifting baselines together.
It does, and it provides crucial context for why we are so stressed today. It outlines how, after World War II, America experienced this incredible economic boom.
Right.
But importantly, it was a boom characterized by a culture of relative equality. Because of wage structures and social norms, people generally lived similar lifestyles. There was a growing cultural acceptance of debt, fueled by things like the GI Bill and early credit cards, but it wasn't toxic yet because median incomes were actually growing in tandem with inflation.
But then something culturally shifted. The treadmill sped up.
Yes. By the 1980s and 90s, we hit what economists call the big stretch. A small, visible portion of very wealthy Americans broke away completely in terms of lifestyle.
Right.
They bought massive homes, enrolled in elite private schools, took luxury vacations, and because of the explosion of mass media and lifestyle advertising, the middle class was watching all of this excess on television every single night.
I see.
The middle class's actual incomes aren't rising as fast anymore, but their expectations for what a normal life looked like were exploding.
So what do?
They used massive amounts of consumer debt to try and bridge the gap, to keep up with that top 1%. Fundamentally changed the modern consumer psyche from one of shared prosperity to one of frantically keeping up with the Joneses through massive fragile leverage.
Playing someone else's game. Buying the Ferrari on credit just to look cool to strangers at a stoplight. Extending the ego far beyond the actual income. It all connects back to the beginning.
It really does.
Which is exactly why Morgan Housel, the author, makes a personal confession at the end of the book that I absolutely love, because it proves the entire thesis.
Yes, he admits that he and his wife deliberately chose to pay off their home mortgage entirely.
Right. Now, from a strictly rational, mathematical, physics of finance perspective, this is a terrible, inefficient decision. Interest rates were at historic lows. He easily could have invested that cash in the stock market and earned a statistically much higher rate of return. Any fee-only financial advisor would look at his spreadsheet and tell him it was a mistake to pay off cheap debt.
Completely.
But he did it anyway. Knowing all the math, he still did it. Why?
Because he realizes he isn't playing a spreadsheet game, he is playing the sleep well at night game. Paying off the mortgage, eliminating that debt, maximized his family's independence and peace of mind.
Yeah.
It eliminated a massive underlying risk if his career suddenly ended. It was completely unreasonable on paper, but it was entirely, perfectly reasonable for his own psychology. He is playing his own game.
Okay, let's pull all of these threads together and bring it home. We have covered massive intellectual ground today. We started with Ronald Reed, the janitor who proved definitively that endurance and patience will absolutely crush a Harvard degree and high leverage.
Definitely.
We learned about the empathy of finance, that nobody's crazy. We're all just looking through the tiny keyholes of our own generational luck and trauma. We learned to deeply respect the twin siblings of luck and risk, and to build a margin of safety, a barbell strategy, so we can survive the bad rolls of the dice.
Right.
We learned that true wealth is what you don't see. It's the gap between your ego and your income. And most importantly, we learned that the highest dividend money pays is not status. It is the freedom to control your own time.
Raw intelligence is not a sustainable advantage in finance. Behavior is, emotional endurance is. Knowing your own game and refusing to play anyone else's is the true secret.
I love that. So I want to leave you listening with one final provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. We've spent this entire deep dive talking about money, but I want you to consider how this exact same behavioral psychology applies to the rest of your life.
If savings is the gap between your ego and your income, consider where else your ego is forcing you to spend valuable, finite resources.
Yeah.
Where are you spending your time, your emotional energy, or your mental health just to signal success or keep up appearances for people who aren't even really paying attention to you? What is the metaphorical Ferrari you are buying with your time? And is it actually making you happy, or is it just quietly robbing you of your freedom?
That is the question right there.
Yeah.
Are you exhausting yourself on the treadmill, or do you know what enough feels like?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us on this massive exploration of the psychology of money. We hope it gave you a completely new lens to look through. Apply these frameworks, figure out what game you're actually playing, and go take control of your time. From all of us here at The Deep Dive, keep listening.